He told me later that the room felt smaller than it really was, like the walls were leaning in to listen. All he could hear was the slow, uneven rhythm of his own breathing and the faint clink of glasses somewhere behind him, as if the whole world had turned into background noise for this one moment. The club in Seoul was drowning in blue light and cigarette haze, a place where music was loud but conversations were louder, and secrets were sold cheaper than whiskey. Keanu sat alone at a corner table, shoulders relaxed but eyes never still. The black suit fit him like armor, but his face carried something no suit could hide, tiredness, and that quiet sadness of a man who had buried more than just friends. To everyone else he was a myth, a ghost people whispered about. To himself, he was just a man trying to make peace with the ghosts he had created. He wasn't there for money, not anymore. Tonight was about a promise he had made to a woman years ago in a hospital corridor that smelled like medicine and regret. She had been the mother of a young boy caught in the crossfire of a deal gone wrong. Keanu had watched that boy bleed out on the pavement, his small hand clutching at air, searching for a future he would never hold. The mother's eyes had burned into Keanu's memory, not with hatred, but with something worse, disappointed hope. "If you ever get the chance," she had whispered, voice shaking, "stop men like them. Don't let my son be for nothing." That sentence had followed him into every empty hotel room, every quiet morning when the coffee tasted like guilt. Tonight, he finally had that chance. The Korean Mafia boss responsible for that deal, the man who had turned the city into a chessboard of fear, was here. His name was Jae-hoon, but the streets called him the gentleman because he smiled when he destroyed you. He built orphanages with dirty money, handed out food in neighborhoods he secretly flooded with drugs. People thanked him with bowed heads and trembling hands, never knowing he was the one who had set their houses on fire in the first place. That was the kind of monster Keanu had come to face, one who wore kindness like a mask. From the second-floor balcony, Keanu watched Jae-hoon move through the crowd below. The boss walked as if the floor adjusted itself for him, as if gravity bent a little wherever he stepped. Men in sharp suits opened paths with subtle nods. Women in glittering dresses laughed too loudly at jokes they didn't find funny. Jae-hoon's smile was perfect, his posture relaxed, his hand resting lightly on the shoulder of a nervous young waiter he pretended to mentor. To the untrained eye, he looked like a successful businessman. To Keanu, he looked like every nightmare he'd spent years trying to erase. Keanu's fingers tightened around the glass in his hand, but he forced himself to loosen his grip. He had learned the hard way that rage was loud, and loud men died first. The old him would have walked down the stairs, guns blazing, taken out half the room and himself along with it. But the old him had left too many mothers crying in hallways. The man sitting here tonight had something the younger assassin never had, humility carved into him by loss. He knew he wasn't invincible. He knew that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about dragging your shaking body forward anyway. As he watched Jae-hoon laugh with his lieutenants, Keanu noticed something he didn't expect. A small boy, maybe 8 or 9, stood near the bar, holding a tray that looked too heavy for his thin arms. The kid's suit was slightly oversized, his shoes obviously borrowed. He moved carefully between tables, eyes wide, trying to be invisible in a place where invisibility was survival. When he passed too close to one of Jae-hoon's men, the lieutenant shoved him lightly with 2 fingers, a gesture that said, "Know your place." The boy bowed in apology, though he had done nothing wrong. Something inside Keanu twisted. That boy's face blurred, overlapped with the memory of the child who had died years before. Same small shoulders, same desperate effort to be useful in a world that only saw them as tools or collateral. Keanu's chest felt tight. He had sworn that if he ever stood in a room like this again, he would not just kill a man and walk away. He would try, however clumsily, to leave it better than he found it, even if better was just one less scared kid. He watched as Jae-hoon beckoned the boy with a curl of his finger. The entire table quieted a little, sensing the shift. The child hurried over, almost spilling a glass in his rush. For a second, the boss's expression softened, like he had found a stray puppy. He adjusted the boy's tie with practiced tenderness, said something that made the kid smile in shy relief. To anyone watching, it looked like kindness. To Keanu, it looked like the most dangerous trick of all, the way evil sometimes wore the face of a patient father. Keanu knew this was the moment he had to decide what kind of man he actually was. The easy route would be to wait, ambush Jae-hoon outside and end him quickly in the dark. No conversation, no risk, just silence after a gunshot. That was efficient. That was what killers did. But the promise he'd made that night in the hospital weighed heavier than the pistol at his back. Don't let my son be for nothing. Ending the boss's life in an alley would not change the story. People would whisper about another vanished criminal, and the system would simply grow another monster to replace him. If he wanted something different, he needed to do something he had never done before. Step into the light, confront the man face to face, and expose him in front of his own kingdom. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about tearing down the illusion of safety and charm that Jae-hoon used to control these people. It was about showing that courage could look like standing alone, unarmed in a room full of enemies and still refusing to bow. Keanu finished his drink, his throat burning not from the alcohol, but from the decision settling inside him like a final verdict. He stood up slowly, feeling the weight of every scar under his shirt, every memory pressed into his bones. As he moved toward the staircase, the music seemed to muffle, as if the club itself was holding its breath. He walked down step by measured step, eyes never leaving Jae-hoon's table. Guards began to notice him, their hands drifting instinctively toward their jackets, faces tightening in recognition. The boy was still standing beside Jae-hoon, clutching the empty tray to his chest like a shield. Their eyes met for a brief second. There was fear there, yes, but also something else. A flicker of desperate curiosity, like the child was silently asking, "Who are you and why aren't you afraid of him?" Keanu gave the smallest shake of his head, a quiet promise that he wasn't there for the boy. He was there to break the chain that had wrapped itself around kids like him for years. He reached the bottom of the stairs, stepped fully into the circle of light around Jae-hoon's table. Conversations died. Glasses stopped midair. Music thumped on obliviously, but no one was listening anymore. The boss turned slowly, his smile already in place, as if greeting an old friend he had expected to see. Their eyes locked, and the air between them turned heavy, almost solid. Jae-hoon rose from his chair with the grace of a man who believed in his own legend, adjusting the cufflinks on his tailored sleeves. His men tensed behind him, waiting for a signal. The boy took one small step back, trapped between terror and fascination. Keanu could feel the weight of every gaze in the room on his back, pressure pushing between his shoulder blades. Before anyone could speak, the power in the club flickered. Lights dimmed, then surged. The room exhaled a nervous murmur. In that brief moment of half-darkness, Keanu saw something cross Jae-hoon's face, just for a heartbeat, a glint of recognition and something like cold amusement, as if the boss had been waiting years for this confrontation. Jae-hoon's lips parted, a slow, calculated smile curving as he leaned forward slightly, eyes never leaving Keanu's. "Finally," he said softly, voice almost lost under the music, "you came back." And in that single, quiet sentence, Keanu realized with a jolt that this wasn't the first chapter of their story at all. It was the continuation of something he didn't remember, a past connection buried so deep that the truth, when it surfaced, might destroy the very reason he had come here tonight. He told me that in that instant, the room felt like it fell away. Just two men standing in the middle of a storm they had both helped create, one of them pretending it was all under control, the other suddenly unsure if he had ever understood the story he thought he was living. Their eyes stayed locked for a long second, long enough for Keanu to see that Jae-hoon wasn't bluffing. There was no fake surprise, no forced recognition. The boss looked at him the way someone might look at a photograph they had kept hidden for years, familiar, unwanted, and strangely valuable. That one word, "finally," echoed in Keanu's chest, stirring pieces of memory he didn't know were still there. He had come here for justice, for a clean ending, and instead he had walked straight into a past he hadn't agreed to remember. "You don't remember me," Jae-hoon said, not as a question but as an accusation wrapped in amusement. The music was still pounding around them, yet somehow his voice slipped through it with ease. "I should feel insulted, but then again, men like you bury things. It's how you survive." Keanu kept his posture steady, though inside he felt like he was standing on thin ice, hearing it crack beneath his boots. There were flashes, days in Asia years ago that he had filed under work, nights where names and faces had all blurred into targets and employers. A corridor lit by cheap fluorescent lights, the smell of stale coffee, a younger version of himself shaking hands with a man he never looked at twice. He searched that haze for Jae-hoon's face and felt a cold realization creeping forward like a shadow he didn't want to step into. "You hired me," Keanu said slowly, the words tasting like rust. "Didn't you?" Jae-hoon's smile widened, pleased, like a teacher watching a student finally catch up to the lesson. "Once," he replied. "A lifetime ago when I was still pretending to be small. You did what you always do. You walked in, fixed a problem, walked out, efficient, cold, forgettable. I admired that about you." His gaze hardened just for a heartbeat. "You were the storm I sent into someone else's life." The crowd around them shifted uncomfortably, trying to understand a conversation that felt far too intimate for a room full of strangers. Some of Jae-hoon's men smirked. Others glanced at one another with wary eyes. No one moved closer. They all sensed something dangerous building in the subtle spaces between words. Keanu could have denied it, could have claimed the boss was playing a psychological game. But he had lived too long with the consequences of his choices to hide behind lies now. His throat tightened as he remembered a mission file, a blurred photo of a man marked for death, and the quiet efficiency with which his younger self had pulled the trigger. He had never asked who benefited, never wondered what kind of vacuum that man's death would create. He had been taught that questions were weaknesses. Finish the job, disappear, don't look back. But here he was, forced to look back. "Was it you?" Keanu's voice was low, controlled, but there was a tremor of something raw underneath. "The drug roots, the arms pipeline, the deal that killed that boy?" His jaw clenched on the last word, as if saying it made the guilt sharper. "No," Jae-hoon said calmly. "That boy died because a man with a gun did not miss." The words landed like blows, and several nearby onlookers flinched instinctively, as if they too had been struck. Keanu's chest burned, but he refused to look away. Shame wanted to curl his shoulders inward to make him smaller, quieter, as if disappearing could rewrite the past. Instead, he straightened his spine. If he had learned anything from the pain he'd caused, it was that humility didn't mean surrender. It meant accepting the full weight of what you'd done and still choosing to stand. "You were nobody back then," Keanu said, forcing the truth into the open. "An underling behind another underling. I didn't see you. I didn't care who you were. I just took the money and walked away. Is that what this is about? You wanted me to remember you." Jae-hoon's eyes flashed just for a second with something like hurt pride. "No, this is about irony. You came here tonight believing you were the hero, come to slay the monster that ruined your life's one noble promise." He tilted his head slightly. "But the truth is you helped build that monster. Every man I removed with your help, every rival you erased, you cleared the board for me. You don't fight fate, Mr. Reeves, you feed it." The boy holding the tray, still close enough to hear, shifted his weight nervously. His eyes darted between them, catching fragments of a story he couldn't fully understand but could feel in his bones. He could sense danger not just from guns and knives, but from the way these two men spoke about life and death like they were old colleagues arguing over a project. Keanu looked at the boy, and the room seemed to narrow. Was this what Jae-hoon was doing now? Training the next generation to move in the shadows, convincing them that survival and cruelty were the same thing? There was a quiet quiver in the child's shoulders, barely noticeable, like he was used to staying very still so no one would punish him for existing. Keanu's anger flared, not the wild, reckless kind he used to carry, but a focused, deliberate fire. "You still hide behind children," Keanu said softly, eyes returning to Jae-hoon's. "Feeding them your version of the world, teaching them that kindness is weakness and fear is a language. That's what you really are, not a gentleman, a scared man dressing fear up as power." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, tiny fractures forming in the respect they had held for Jae-hoon. They didn't dare show it fully, but some heads tilted, some jaws tightened. Doubt was an infection, and once it entered a room, it spread quickly. Jae-hoon's smile chilled. "Careful," he warned, though his voice remained smooth. "I built this city's silence with my own hands. Every man here owes me something. Every woman here has someone she loves still breathing because I decided they could. You think a few poetic lines will break that?" One of the lieutenants stepped forward, shoulders squared, hand halfway inside his jacket. "Boss, say the word," he muttered in Korean, eyes locked on Keanu with open hatred. "We end this now." Jae-hoon didn't even glance at him. "No," he replied, "not yet." His attention stayed on Keanu. "He came all this way to talk. The least we can do is listen to what his guilt sounds like." Keanu could feel every instinct screaming at him to reach for his own weapon, to end this before the numbers swallowed him. But he forced his hands to remain visible, empty at his sides. He had decided before walking down those stairs that courage, real courage, would require more than perfect aim. It would require restraint. It would require faith that some people in this room still had a piece of their soul intact, waiting for a reason to wake up. "I'm not here to impress anyone," Keanu said. "I know what I did, I know what I helped create, and I can't undo that." He nodded once as if sealing his own confession. "But I can decide what I do next. I can decide to stand here in your house and tell the truth. You are killing this city one favor at a time. You make people feel grateful for the chains you put around them." Someone near the back let out a shaky breath, louder than they intended. Another man lowered his gaze, guilt creeping into the lines around his mouth. These were men who had taken money, protection, chances they didn't deserve, telling themselves they had no choice. Now, for the first time, someone was speaking the things they tried not to think about. Jae-hoon's jaw flexed. Beneath the calm exterior, rage scratched like claws against glass. "You are lecturing them on morality," he asked quietly. "You, the man who has left more bodies in his wake than any of my captains combined. Do you think they don't know what you are?" Keanu's answer came without hesitation. "They know what I was." His voice thickened slightly, not with weakness, but with a steady, painful honesty. "I am not proud of the man I used to be. I lived without kindness because I thought it made me strong. I turned my back on humility because it felt too close to shame. I was wrong. I was deeply, catastrophically wrong." He breathed out slowly. "But I am still alive, and as long as I'm breathing, I get to choose differently." Silence wrapped itself around the room. Even the music seemed to recede. The boy stared at Keanu with open astonishment, as if no adult had ever stood in front of power and admitted they were wrong before. In a world where everyone lied to feel bigger, hearing someone confess their failures felt like witnessing a miracle. For the first time, Jae-hoon's confidence flickered. Not much, just a hairline crack along the smooth surface of his composure. "And what exactly do you think you're going to choose tonight?" he asked. "Redemption? There is no redemption here. There is only control, mine or yours." Keanu took a slow breath. He knew this couldn't end with a speech. Words had power, but men like Jae-hoon only truly believed in force and leverage. If he wanted to pull even one person out of this man's shadow, he needed more than honesty. He needed a move that would shift the entire board. His gaze fell briefly to the boy again, then to the guards, then to the exits. There was fear, yes, but there was also hunger. People here were starving for a different kind of story, one where courage didn't belong only to the man at the head of the table. He lifted his hands slightly, palms open, as if offering something invisible. "I'm not here to take your place," he said to Jae-hoon. "I'm here to end the idea that men like us get to decide who lives in fear and who doesn't. Walk away tonight. You have enough money to disappear. Let go of this city. Let go of these people. You don't have to keep being this man." For a tiny, fragile moment, the suggestion hung in the air like a fragile glass ornament. Some part of the room leaned toward it, toward the impossible idea that a monster might choose to stop being one. It was foolish, naive, almost childish. And yet, it was also the most dangerous thing Keanu had said, because it wasn't a threat. It was an invitation to change. You could see it in Jae-hoon's eyes. A flash of offense, then disbelief, then something far more complicated. Whatever kindness might have once lived inside him, however small, however buried, stirred for a heartbeat, confused by the door being held open. Then his expression hardened into something like ice. There was a soft, metallic click behind Keanu. One of the lieutenants had lost patience. A gun barrel pressed against the back of his ribs, firm and unshaking. The air thickened. Someone gasped near the front row of tables. Jae-hoon stepped closer, until only a breath of space separated them. His voice dropped to a whisper meant only for Keanu, though everyone strained to hear. "You still don't understand," he said. "This city doesn't need your redemption arc. It needs to know what happens to men who challenge me in my own house." The boy's tray slipped from his fingers and clattered noisily to the floor, glasses shattering, liquid spilling like a small, broken promise. He froze, eyes wide with dread, knowing the kind of punishment mistakes usually earned here. Keanu saw the child flinch, saw the way Jae-hoon's head snapped in his direction, annoyance flashing sharp and fast. In that heartbeat, caught between the gun at his back, the boss in front of him, and the terrified boy to his right, Keanu realized he was going to have to choose, right now, whether this night would be about his need to settle a score, or about proving, once and for all, that he could be the kind of man who risked everything to protect someone who couldn't protect themselves. He said the moment the tray hit the floor, time stopped feeling like seconds and started feeling like choices. The sound of breaking glass cut through the music, through the murmurs, through every layer of fear this place had ever built. That small accident, that tiny human mistake, became louder than Jae-hoon's whole empire. Every eye snapped to the boy. His shoulders tightened, head bowed instinctively, as if he could make himself vanish before the punishment came. Keanu had seen that posture 1,000 times, in war zones, alleyways, back rooms. It was the shape a human body took when it had learned too young that existing was dangerous. The barrel at Keanu's back pressed in harder, the lieutenant hissing, "Don't move." He could feel the man's breath on his neck, hot and nervous. For all their training, most killers were still afraid when things didn't go exactly according to plan. Jae-hoon's jaw flexed once. It wasn't rage that crossed his face first. It was irritation, like a businessman whose meeting had been interrupted by an inconvenient phone call. He turned his head slowly toward the boy, and that lazy, practiced smile never reached his eyes. "Pick it up," he said softly. The kid dropped to his knees at once, hands shaking so hard he could barely grab the larger shards. A thin line of blood appeared on his fingertip when the glass bit into his skin, but he did not cry out. He just bit his lip, shoulders trembling. Keanu watched something inside him tearing open. He knew this pattern too well. Small mistakes, small punishments, slow training to believe that cruelty was mercy. He could feel the room holding its breath, waiting to see how far the boss would go, how much pain they would have to pretend was normal. The gun behind him dug deeper. "I said don't move," the lieutenant repeated, harder this time. For a split second, the easy way flashed through Keanu's mind. Do nothing, save his strength, wait for the right tactical moment. But that was the man he used to be, the one who calculated angles and collateral damage and told himself that distance made him innocent. He wasn't that man anymore. Very slowly, in full view of everyone, Keanu lifted his hands higher, fingers spread, making his movements obvious and deliberate. "I'm going to turn around," he said calmly, voice steady. "Don't be stupid." The lieutenant's grip faltered. No one had ever talked to him like that in front of Jae-hoon. The certainty he had worn like armor cracked just enough. Keanu twisted, faster than the man expected, and in one clean motion he slid his body to the side, caught the gun wrist, and drove his elbow down. Bone crunched. The weapon slipped free. He caught it before it hit the floor, palmed it, and pointed it not at Jae-hoon, but at the ground, muzzle aimed harmlessly at the carpet. Gasps rippled through the club, chairs scraped. Several of Jae-hoon's men half drew their weapons, waiting for a signal. Jae-hoon lifted one finger, and they froze. Keanu tossed the gun aside. It clattered across the floor and skidded under a nearby table, far out of anyone's immediate reach. He could feel dozens of stunned eyes on him. "I'm not here to slaughter your people," he said loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "Not the ones who still have a choice." His gaze landed on the boy, still kneeling, still bleeding quietly as he gathered broken glass. "You lay a hand on him," Keanu added, turning his eyes back to Jae-hoon, "and this ends differently." Jae-hoon studied him with a kind of cold fascination, as if he were examining a rare animal that had wandered into the wrong cage. "You lecture, you confess, and now you protect strays," he said, tone soft but cutting. "Who exactly are you trying to save, him or yourself?" Keanu almost smiled, but there was no joy in it. "Both," he admitted. "If I walk out of here the same man I walked in as, then your story wins. I'm done letting men like you write my life." A low, startled laugh broke from someone near the bar. Not mocking, almost relieved. The spell was cracking. They had never seen anyone speak this way to their boss, not and still be breathing. Jae-hoon's eyes flickered to the crowd, measuring the shift. You could see him recalculating, deciding how to keep control. He stepped closer to the boy, who had finally gathered the last shard and was now frozen, staring at the floor. "Stand up," Jae-hoon told the child. The boy obeyed, bloodied fingers squeezing the edges of the empty tray. His lip trembled once, a tiny rebellion against the fear swallowing him. Jae-hoon tilted his head toward Keanu, as if addressing him, but his words were meant for everyone. "You see, this is what you call strength. A man who breaks into my house, disarms my guard, and demands mercy for a clumsy boy." He shook his head slowly. "Do you think the world you dream of exists, Mr. Reeves? One where kindness protects you from bullets?" Keanu's chest rose and fell steady. "No," he replied. "Kindness doesn't stop bullets, people do, people who choose not to pull the trigger." For just a breath, their eyes locked again, and in that stare lay years of opposite choices. Jae-hoon had built an empire by giving up on the idea that people could be better. Keanu was standing here risking his life on the chance that they could. Jae-hoon's smile faded entirely. He raised his hand and placed it gently on the boy's shoulder. The child flinched, then held perfectly still. The room tightened, dread pulling everyone inward. "You want to save him?" Jae-hoon asked quietly. "Show them what that costs." Keanu's instincts screamed. He took a half step forward, but 3 guns appeared from different angles, gleaming under the club lights, all aimed squarely at his chest. They didn't need a signal this time. Every man in the room knew what would happen if he moved again. Jae-hoon looked at the boy. When he spoke, his voice changed, softer, deceptively warm. "Do you know who this man is?" he asked in Korean. The boy shook his head, eyes wide. His answer was barely a whisper. "No, sir." "He is a killer," Jae-hoon said, his hand still resting lightly on the child's shoulder. "A famous one. Men speak his name like a legend. He walks into rooms and decides who doesn't walk back out." He paused, letting that land. "Tonight he came for me, but you knocked over the tray, didn't you?" The boy swallowed hard, panic building. "I am sorry, sir, I didn't." Jae-hoon squeezed his shoulder, not hard, but firmly enough to stop the apology. He smiled in that gentle way that had fooled so many, masking the cruelty underneath. "No, there are no accidents in my house," he said. "Someone always pays the price." Keanu understood what was coming a split second before it happened. A cold, heavy certainty dropped through his body like a stone. "Stop," he said, voice low but sharp. "This is between you and me. Leave him out of it." Jae-hoon looked up, amused again, as if they were back at the start of some casual conversation. "You want to teach this city about courage?" he asked. "Then let them watch." Slowly, almost casually, Jae-hoon reached inside his jacket and pulled out a gun. Not one of the heavy, brutal pieces his lieutenants carried, but a smaller, elegant handgun. He held it with effortless familiarity, the way some men held a pen. He didn't point it at Keanu. He placed it in the boy's hands. A stunned, horrified silence crashed over the room. Even the music seemed to choke and die mid-beat. The child stared at the weapon as if it were a live snake. His fingers, slick with his own blood, slipped against the cold metal. Jae-hoon crouched slightly so he was eye-level with the boy. "You're scared," he said gently. "That's normal. Fear is a teacher. Listen carefully now." He shifted his gaze toward Keanu. "This man is a threat to everything that keeps you alive, to your food, your shelter, your protection. If he lives, you suffer. If he dies, you belong to a world you understand. So choose." He wrapped his hands lightly around the boy's forearms, guiding the gun upward, pointing it straight at Keanu's chest. Keanu didn't move. Every instinct screamed at him to dive, disarm, do anything to stop this. But any sudden move now would give Jae-hoon exactly what he wanted. Chaos, gunfire, bodies on the floor. And at the center of it, a terrified child who would spend the rest of his life believing he had pulled a trigger he couldn't take back. Keanu locked eyes with the boy. He saw the tremor in the kid's jaw, the tears barely contained, the raw, desperate pleading that said, "Please, someone tell me what to do." Very slowly, Keanu lowered his chin in a small nod, not toward the gun, but toward the boy himself. His voice, when he spoke, was steady but softer than it had been all night, like he was talking to someone sitting alone on a dark staircase. "You don't have to do this," he said. "I know what they've told you. I know what this place feels like you owe them your life, like there are only bad choices." His chest rose once, then fell. "But you still get to decide the kind of person you are, even here, even now." The boy's arms shook harder. The gun wavered. Jae-hoon's whisper slid into his ear. "He's lying to you," the boss murmured. "Men like him don't change. If you don't pull the trigger, he will. If not now, then later. That's how the world works." Keanu's throat tightened, but he didn't look away. "He's right about one thing," he said quietly. "I have killed people, too many. I can't give you back what men like me have taken from this world." His voice thickened, but he never let it crack. "But I can give you this. I will not hurt you, no matter what you choose. I swear to you." The room watched, caught between two realities. The one Jae-hoon had built with fear, and the one Keanu was trying, clumsily but honestly, to offer with truth. "You think words make you safe?" Jae-hoon said, louder now, addressing everyone. "Look at him, look at this child." His voice grew sharp. "He does not need your speeches. He needs certainty. He needs someone to take responsibility so he doesn't have to be afraid." "He needs a way out," Keanu countered, eyes never leaving the boy. "Not a new cage painted gold." The boy's breathing grew ragged. You could see his mind trying to hold two worlds at once. The one where the boss fed him, clothed him, kept him alive. And the one where a stranger stood unarmed, willing to die rather than press more weight onto his small shoulders. A single tear slipped down the child's cheek. Keanu saw it, and something in him finally broke open. All the years of distance, all the comfort of not feeling too much. He let it hurt. He let it show. "I was you once," Keanu said, voice low and raw. "Not a child, but close enough. Somebody put a gun in my hand and told me it was the only way to matter. They said the world was cruel, that kindness would get me killed. I believed them, and every time I pulled the trigger, a piece of me went quiet so I wouldn't hear it scream." He swallowed. "Don't be me." The boy's finger hovered near the trigger, barely touching it. Jae-hoon's patience thinned. His smile was gone. All that remained was cold, brittle control. "Do it," he whispered, "or I show you what happens when you disappoint me." Keanu took a breath and did the most dangerous, most vulnerable thing he could. He stepped closer. Guns around the room snapped up, safeties clicked off. A half-dozen barrels targeted his heart. Still, he took another slow step until the muzzle of the gun nearly pressed against his chest. He could see the boy's eyes in painful detail now, terrified, searching. "If you pull that trigger," Keanu said gently, "I won't hate you. I won't even be angry. I'll understand, because they never taught you another way." His voice steadied with strange, quiet courage. "But listen to me just for 1 second. You are not their weapon. You are not his. You are not mine. You are you. And the first choice you make for yourself can be not to kill." The boy's breath hitched. His arms shook violently now, the gun swaying. In that trembling, in that hesitation, the entire room saw something they had forgotten was possible. Resistance. Not with fists or bullets, but with the simple refusal to obey fear. Jae-hoon saw it too. His hand tightened around the boy's forearms, trying to force the gun steady. "Enough," he snapped, mask cracking. "Pull the trigger." In that instant, Keanu did the only thing left. He opened his arms. Not out to grab the gun, not to strike, not to defend, but out wide, palms empty, chest exposed. The universal gesture of surrender. "If it has to be someone," he said softly, "let it be me, not you, not him." He flicked his gaze briefly toward the crowd, then back to the boy. "I won't run, I won't fight. I will stand right here and let you decide who you want to be." The club felt like it stopped breathing. The boy stared at him, at the open hands, at the unprotected heart. His whole life, power had looked like men standing above him, shouting orders, waving guns. This was the first time he had seen power in someone standing still, willing to break, but not willing to break someone else. 1 second. 2. 3. And then with a choked sob, the boy tore his hands free. The gun dropped. It hit the floor with a heavy, final sound that seemed to reverberate through every wall in the place. No one moved. No one spoke. In the quiet after, even the lights felt different, like the room itself was stunned. The child staggered back, tears streaming down his face, shaking from head to toe. He didn't run to Keanu. He didn't run to Jae-hoon. He just stood there, empty hands hanging at his sides, as if waiting for the world to end. Jae-hoon stared at the gun on the carpet, and for the first time, real fury lit his features. Not cold, calculated anger, but something wilder, almost desperate. His control, his story, had just been interrupted by the smallest person in the room. "You disappoint me," he said to the boy, voice low and deadly. He reached for the child's throat. Keanu moved. He didn't think, there wasn't time. A lifetime of muscle memory snapped into focus, but this time it answered to a different master. He lunged forward, shoulders twisting, one hand catching Jae-hoon's wrist, the other striking his elbow in a sharp, precise arc. The gun went skidding further away. Jae-hoon grunted, pain flashing across his face. Chaos erupted. Shouts, chairs overturning, guns being drawn. But the first man to fire never got the chance. One of the older lieutenants, silent all night, watching from the side, grabbed his arm. "Enough!" he barked, shocking his own comrades. "Look around you." And they did. They saw a boy who had refused to kill. They saw a foreign assassin standing with his body between that child and their boss. They saw Jae-hoon reaching, not to protect, but to punish. And in that brief, fragile moment, every quiet doubt they had swallowed over the years rose together like a tide. Keanu kept his grip on Jae-hoon, but he didn't strike again. He could have. He could have ended it right there with a twist of his hands, a single brutal move. Instead, he did something far harder. He stopped. He looked around at the room. The guards, the patrons, the workers hiding behind pillars, the bartender frozen mid-step. His voice, when he spoke, broke through the noise with clear, unwavering conviction. "This was never about me and him," Keanu said. "This is about you, all of you. You decide what tonight means. You can keep living afraid, doing nothing, telling yourselves you have no choice, or you can choose to be better than us, better than me, better than him." His grip on Jae-hoon loosened just enough to show that he wasn't hiding behind violence. He was offering the city back to the people who lived in it. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then a woman from the back, a server in a black dress, hair pulled tight into a bun, stepped forward. Her voice shook, but she made herself speak. "My brother," she said, staring at Jae-hoon. "You said he disappeared because he was careless with your money. He never came home." Another man spoke up. "My father owed you. You said it was handled. We never saw him again." One by one, voices rose. Not shouting, not yet, just remembering out loud. The quiet stories they had all filed under the cost of survival began to pile up, heavy and undeniable. Jae-hoon tried to twist free, but the lieutenant who had grabbed his own man earlier stepped in close now, placing a hand on the boss's shoulder. Not protecting, containing. His eyes were different, clearer, as if something finally snapped into focus. "You said you kept us safe," the lieutenant murmured to Jae-hoon. "From men like him." He looked at Keanu, then at the boy. "But you would have killed a child tonight, in front of everyone, for control." "That boy is mine," Jae-hoon spat. "I own his life just as I own yours." The lieutenant's jaw tightened. Not anymore. He looked at Keanu, searching for something. Keanu met his gaze and said nothing, letting the moment belong to them. Silently, one by one, several of Jae-hoon's men lowered their weapons. Not all, a few remained loyal, knuckles white, eyes wild. But loyalty built on fear is brittle, and right now, fear was slipping through their fingers. "You think you can do this without me?" Jae-hoon hissed, voice rising. "You think this city will suddenly become kind because one broken assassin gave a speech? The men waiting outside, the enemies lining up, they will eat you alive." "Maybe," the lieutenant said quietly, "but at least it will be our choice." He released Jae-hoon's shoulder and took one small step back. No one moved to shield the boss. In that empty space, Keanu felt something he had never expected to feel in a room like this. Hope. Not the soft, easy kind from movies, but the hard, gritty version that comes after too much pain, wary, scarred, but still standing. He turned to the boy, who was staring at him as if trying to understand who he had just become. Keanu crouched down slowly, bringing himself to the child's eye level. "You did something very brave," Keanu said softly. "Braver than anything I've ever done with a gun in my hands." The boy shook his head, still trembling. I was just scared." "That's what courage is," Keanu replied. "Doing the right thing while you're still scared." A fresh tear rolled down the boy's cheek, but this time it wasn't only fear. There was something cleaner in it. Relief, maybe, possibility. Keanu reached into his jacket, moved slowly so no one panicked, and pulled out a small folded photograph, worn edges, colors faded. The face of the boy who had died years ago stared up from it, frozen in time with a crooked smile. "This is why I came here," Keanu said, voice raw. "I couldn't save him. I thought killing the man who caused it would fix something inside me, but I was wrong. The only thing that heals anything is what you just did." He pressed the photo into the child's uninjured hand. "Don't forget his face. Let him be the last kid who died for our mistakes." The boy clutched the picture like it was a lifeline. Behind them, Jae-hoon glared at the room that had once bowed to him. His empire hadn't been toppled by bullets or bombs. It was unraveling under the weight of its own lies, pulled loose by a single choice. A child refusing to kill a man who refused to hide. "This is not over," Jae-hoon hissed. Keanu stood slowly, meeting his eyes one last time. "For you, maybe not," he said. "For me, it is." He stepped back, giving the others space. What happened next would be their decision. Arrest him, exile him, turn him over to enemies. Keanu wasn't here to script their courage. He'd done enough of that in his old life. As he turned toward the exit, the room seemed to widen again, walls no longer closing in. People stepped aside, not out of fear this time, but out of something closer to respect. Not for what he'd done in the past, but for what he'd chosen tonight. The boy hurried after him, small footsteps quick and uncertain. "Mister," he called softly. Keanu stopped, looked back. "Are you a good man?" the child asked. There was no accusation in it, only a fragile need to believe that people could be something other than what this place had taught him. Keanu hesitated. He could have lied, called himself a hero, painted this night in clean, easy colors. But he had promised himself, and the memory of every face in that hospital corridor, that he would be honest from now on. "I'm trying," he said. "Some days I fail. Tonight I tried harder than before." He gave a small, tired smile. "Maybe that's all being a good man really is, trying again and protecting someone even when it scares you." The boy nodded slowly, eyes glistening. He slipped the photograph carefully into his pocket, as if tucking away a new definition of strength. Keanu stepped out into the cold Seoul night. The air tasted different, sharp, clean, full of the noise of a city that had no idea what had just happened in one of its hidden rooms. Behind him, decisions would be made, alliances broken, new paths drawn in the ash of old ones. He didn't know if Jae-hoon would vanish, be arrested, or claw his way back from this humiliation. He didn't know if the men who had lowered their guns would hold their courage tomorrow. But he knew this. A boy who should have become a weapon had just chosen not to. A room that had lived by fear had watched kindness stand its ground and survive. And a man who had spent most of his life running from the weight of his own actions had finally stood still long enough to carry them, and still move forward. Later, when he told the story, he never called himself a savior or a legend. He just said this. In a room full of guns and ghosts, the bravest person there was a kid with shaking hands, who decided his soul wasn't for sale. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like an ending worth living with.